Anyhow, we're going to start. I'm going to give a short presentation just to frame the topic, and then we have 5 panelists, 4 of whom are here. Hopefully we'll have 5, I'll invite up, and they will give individual framing, short presentations, introductory presentations, kind of to comment on how they see this problem and the issues all around security of the industrial Internet of Things. And again, like you're going to see in every one of mine, I want to thank our sponsors and encourage you very much to go to visit the suppliers who are listed here, particularly all of them. I don't want to discriminate against the automation companies. It's just I also want to support the other companies who are here. Now, IIoT, industrial IoT, as I mentioned, I think in the last one, I don't remember what I say, by the way, so when I say that. But, when we started talking about it, it was just about devices. And we certainly are seeing that. We see a big trend today about IIoT devices. But the problem is much bigger than that. And actually, today, we started using the term digital transformation. And, digital transformation is certainly a flashier term, a nicer term, I guess. But it also, I think, has implications that go broader than IIoT. But when I talk about IIoT cybersecurity, we need to address all of those issues, okay? So you're going to see that thread throughout this discussion. But we as a company are seeing activity with digital transformation or IIoT or industrial IoT in all of our practices. In the energy practices, we see people, particularly in oil and gas, very interested in IoT. We have power plants. In manufacturing, it's particularly popular. In Europe, they call it Industry 4.0 is another version of this. And we see that happening a lot. But we also, at ARC, we also cover smart cities, which for us is a whole range of things, from transportation systems to smart buildings and everything else. And again, IIoT is a big issue in things like smart buildings today, in particular. And IIoT, whether as you're talking about digital transformation, now digital transformation is a broader issue because it gets into a lot more cloud and data collection and things, which is a broader issue. But at the heart of it all are sensors and collecting data and connecting to things in plants. Now, it might be existing type of products. It may actually be existing products. It may be new PLCs. It may be all kinds of things that are not just simple devices. Everybody tends to think it's some extra device you hook on something or a camera. It's much broader than that. But this digital transformation is being driven by this explosion in IoT devices with analytics, a big focus today on analytics, as well as cloud apps. And again, we see that these are the practices we have in our smart cities. We see it in smart services, smart products, smart business. Everything you can think of with smart is leveraging IoT devices these days. And they certainly hope, I don't know how many they're getting yet, but they're trying to drive initiatives that will give you reduced costs, increased productivity, longer capital asset lifetimes is a very big one. A big driver is preventive maintenance, as you know, or predictive maintenance. Safer and cleaner operations, improved and enhanced service offerings. A lot of our suppliers build products that they are mounting devices on to be able to then sell service support and things like that. And these are all new business models for them. Now, one thing that this is doing, again, I'm talking more with digital transformation, but you can't separate the two issues. But one thing I think is very noteworthy with digital transformation is the change in the architectures that we're seeing within industrial companies. And when I say industrial and industrial company, I'm talking about IT and OT. I'm an old OT guy in using today's lingo for what I used to do. I would call myself an automation guy. But I've really learned you can't separate IT, OT, particularly today. You have an incident that affects the IT systems. It brings down the whole business just as bad as if you have an OT incident. You might not damage equipment, but you can still bring it down. But if you look on the left, that's kind of the traditional industrial kind of architecture, where at the top you see IT systems in data centers of some type, private, they could be public, in data centers, and they support a ton of users, often just local users or people who are directly connected to the company. And they connect down to automation systems or OT systems or plant systems at the bottom. And you see the classic kind of structure of that down there is the Purdue model, level 0, level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. It is a mix of IT products, but an awful lot of OT products like PLCs and DCS systems and things. And again, when I mention people first talk about IIoT, they think about sticking devices in those bottom boxes. But what's really happening is more is what's on the right. The whole architecture is changing. Indeed, you have things at the bottom. And if you look at the picture I have at the bottom, you have things like smart trucks, or devices that are out there doing mining and things like that. But then right next to it, I'm sorry it's such a small picture, but that's a kind of a new way of doing automation systems. This is the open process automation, which now is the open group, open forum. It's not my specialty, but it's a new way of doing automation systems with a bunch of goals to reduce the cost, extend the lifetime, enable upgrades and things like that. But it's really a blend of IT/OT systems. It's not the same old classic PLC type technology or DCS. Now you're using microprocessors more integrated in, you have data collection, a lot of connectivity and stuff. And then above it, we're seeing all kinds of networking equipment, which is getting into the plants. The big important thing here is that nice one line out of a plant to an IT system on the left, which is the way it used to be. When I used to work in the steel industry, and it was very clear. You downloaded a production schedule, and you uploaded the results. That was it. No other things were done. Today, it's not that way at all. People want to collect all kinds of data, and then they're interacting with things. So those single one-line kind of interfaces have shifted to this thing on the right, which are all kind of edge devices, gateways, Ethernet switches being put in. Everything is all driven by connectivity. And then at the top, everything is going to the cloud, including things that used to be in the automation system, like some of the applications that would have been normally down in the bottom on the left are now up in the cloud. Like a advanced process control type application or something that's doing optimization, something that is not necessarily real time per se, but it's moving up to the cloud. And there's a lot of reasons, as you all know, to drive that. So the whole architecture is changing. And the big driver for a lot of this is connectivity. So as I mentioned, this is that box I told you I couldn't show you. It was that little one on the right, up there on the top left. Eric, hello. So we do have 5 on our panel now. Anyhow, if you look on the upper left, that's the open process automation platform that ExxonMobil has been driving for years, and there's other people involved with the open forum. Again, that's not my specialty, but if you look at that, it's got lots of different devices, and the key feature of it is it's designed for connectivity. The same thing is happening with new PLCs, new DCS systems. It's not just an isolated device simply there to do control. Now it's to do control and connect with other things. So connectivity is being built into all of that. As well as seamless kind of connectivity with the cloud. Now, IIoT, so all of this, I'm just broadening my definition. I've done this before and people told me, you can't do this. We had a forum a couple years ago where I had a panel on IIoT cybersecurity. And I framed it as being connectivity, all kinds of things all over the place. And someone said, well, you can't talk about that because it's too general of a case. In order for us to talk about cybersecurity strategy, you have to have a well-defined use case, which I agree with. But the issue was, that's the problem. We don't have use cases like that. So what do we do about it? So one thing that's happened recently, though, is when you look at IIoT, a lot of people are very concerned about threats today, be they device-related or not device-related. It's just that there's a heightened interest in cybersecurity today. The thing with the NotPetya ransomware attacks. And when you're a CEO, I guess, of a large company and you read somebody just lost hundreds of millions of dollars and tremendous production or operating disruptions, they say, hey, I don't want that happening to me. Doesn't matter whether it's a device, whether it's an IT system, it doesn't matter to them. They don't want that happening. Things like crash override, which took down the power grid, or WannaCry with Tech Republic. In any case, I listed these, I forget the exact cases, but the point was that those types of things are happening, which has boards and CEOs very concerned about cybersecurity. And that is now delaying. Now they're saying, we don't want you doing these digital we want you to do the digital transformation, but we don't want you to do the digital transformation unless you can guarantee it's going to be secure. So you have this dilemma. And it's actually delaying launching of many programs. I think that's still happening quite a bit. It's also, if you look from the point of view of the people who sell devices and IoT and that are promoting IoT, it's hurting them because they're trying to sell new solutions to these companies. And they're saying, well, we can't do that until we're sure it's all going to be secure. And again, the security is a bigger issue. And then you also have the OEMs themselves who are losing their ability. Like somebody says, oh, I'm going to put in a new machine, a machining center or something in your factory. And by the way, I'm going to add all these features to it so that I can monitor it, so I can come and take care of it for you, because they're trying to sell services, which is a wonderful idea, I think. But then the person says, you're not putting that in my plant. You're not going to connect that, all because of cybersecurity concerns. So all of these players are being hurt very much because of cybersecurity. Now, and I think their concerns are valid. You know, now, Doug Wally's not in here, I don't think, but in his survey from last year, I pulled some statistics out. And it was very interesting, like this was industrial IoT concerns. The things that people are worried about is, first of all, lack of security considerations. It's been several years now. People, the IIC and other organizations have been working on standards to say what needs to be done to build a secure device. That's very good. I applaud that. But the question is, how many people are actually doing that, number one. We know that's not true. There's a big challenge to getting over that one. But I would also say the issue is much bigger than that. I'm going to show you a slide in a second. The problem isn't just making the device secure. You'll see in a second. But so we have all these things that have happened. There have been kind of issues that come up. The companies are also, that, you know, any industrial companies already knows, anybody that knows about cybersecurity in industrial plants is already concerned about the fact that the devices they already have in their plant aren't secure. Now you're going to bring in some more devices that aren't secure. So they're very reluctant about the whole problem. But they are valid concerns, I think, because those things are true. The devices in plants aren't secure. A lot of the new devices are not secure. So the question is, what can one do about that? Now, here's when I talk about the IIoT cybersecurity. And in this case, I'm talking about any kind of device that's built, whether it is a camera that you put in the plant, some kind of sensor for some type of process parameter, or maybe a new PLC, a new type of controller of some type, the OPA platform that I showed you earlier, the ExxonMobil one that when Exxon just started. Unless you can be sure those are secure, you have a problem. But this picture kind of talks about all of those. And if you look, what I tried to show, it's the supply chain, but it's the supply chain of this broad-based definition of IoT device. You know, on the left, certainly you have the technology providers, and you need them to make sure they build a secure device. That's what you want. Again, we know that's a challenge, but that's what we want. And that involves things like secure development lifecycle processes, secure manufacturing and configuration. It's one thing to say I designed a software securely, but if somebody can compromise that during manufacturing, now you have a problem again. As well as secure support. And one of the big things with IoT type things these days is you're going to always have to have some kind of support for updates and things like that. So whoever builds that device or that equipment needs to make sure that they can securely support it. Then you take that device and you sell it to an OEM who's going to put it on a machine or do something with it. You could think of OEM, well, let's say an OEM. You may or may not have that. You may just buy devices. But again, you have the same kind of issues, secure development lifecycle, secure supply chains in this case, because somebody's shipping a device to somebody else who's going to use it to integrate it into a machine. You've got secure manufacturing and configuration of that machine, that second thing that you're putting it in. And then again, you need secure support. And then you take this thing that you built and you give it to distributors. That's a security issue. You've got to make sure that it's secure supply chain, physical supply chains. And even things like the sales process have to be secure, because in the sales process, you may get information to configure it and do things like that. Then you have to worry about when it's implemented in your plant. I would personally, I did a webinar with Intel on this. And it actually opened my eyes to a lot of the things they were doing. They got some solutions for that to help with that for certain parts of this. But it really opened my eyes about the issue of the supply chain. Just to clarify too, whenever people talk about supply chain, I think in cybersecurity, IIoT cybersecurity, they're talking about the software supply chain or firmware supply chain. You know, the fact that every system today, when you put together a device, everybody's using a lot of software from other places and making sure that all of that is secure and making sure that that's sustained, the security is sustained. That's one supply chain. This I'm also talking, the other issue is the physical supply chain or the process supply chain of taking the devices, implementing them in your system, installing them. You got to have people who are going to install them. One of the things as you think about it, it's funny because I just recently shifted from Cox to Verizon. This was about a year ago. But the guy came in and had to change the whole firewall. If you had FiOS, it's a FiOS system. But one thing I was impressed with is the firewall. Usually they come in, they put it in, and here's this guy. I mean, he's very good at what he does, but he doesn't want to take a half an hour to go configuring that firewall and putting in codes and all kinds of stuff for me. The thing that I thought was positive, actually, though, it had a different password on that firewall. Usually when I buy something, it's all admin, or they all have default passwords. This one actually had a different one. You actually got it, but it was written on the firewall, which was okay, or the gateway, the interface for me. But you have to trust that when you send out the device and put it in, if somebody installs it, that they actually go through and enable the security that's built into the device. That's another big concern today. There's a lot of security built into devices. If you can get the suppliers who make them to deal with security, you'll get something that is security enabled. But whether you enable it is a different question, whether you take advantage of it or not. And depending on who's installing it and stuff like that, it can be a time-consuming process. So you may not use the security. So you end up still with the same effect as having a poorly defined device in your plant. And then in the end, the end user also has to worry about providing a secure operating environment and also enabling support from all those suppliers. I think it's impossible, probably even today, to try to keep up with all of the software patches and security upgrades that need to be done. And we all have PCs and we all deal with Microsoft, so you can deal with that one, or maybe Apple, I guess. But now when you say these devices from all these people, like in my house, my wife just recently bought us some cameras. It was funny. Here I'm a cybersecurity guy, and I'm going around putting these cameras in my house. We now have these 4 cameras. I was just looking at them last night. I got an alert, actually, and I looked at it last night. And I saw my son on it, who was visiting. But, when you sit there and say, here, I'm accessing it from Florida, and I live in Virginia, who else could access that if they wanted to? So we're kind of going down that path. And if all of a sudden there is a flaw, a vulnerability in that device, somebody has to deal with it, and that's got to be suppliers in the future. So anyhow, we see this as the big challenge. That's how I frame the IIoT cybersecurity challenge today. And what we've done is, my job is to frame the issue, but I just want to make one more comment. I went to Germany. I'll give Siemens kudos for this. It was to visit. It was around, Siemens has an initiative they launched called this Charter of Trust. And what it is that I found very interesting is, they are very big on doing IIoT, Industrial Internet of Things, or Industry 4.0, rightfully so. They have many clients, particularly in discrete manufacturing and that want to take advantage of all those benefits. But what they've realized is that unless everybody in the environment where you're putting this device is playing the same game, unless everything is secure, Siemens can't solve all the problems of the world. And if they buy a device from one supplier, they can't, even if they do get them to secure it, it doesn't solve all the problems if they put it into a plant where someone's using somebody's communication equipment or something else that's not secure. It's an enormous issue, and the only way you can solve it, I was going to put up there, it takes a family to solve this problem, because it really takes all of these people. And the one thing, what I was going to say, that I just mentioned it because what they've done, and I found it very interesting, because when I first went there and I was listening, I thought they were talking about they've gotten their suppliers to all buy into a common security thing, so to make sure that what they provide was secure. It's much broader than that. What they really have, if you can't see it, unfortunately, but the people who are in the charter of trust, many of them, I don't think they have anything to do with Siemens. Well, maybe they do. I don't want to say don't use Siemens products, but I mean, indeed, there was IBM, who's a partner of theirs, but there's companies like NXP, if you know them. I'm sorry, I can't see the slide myself. So I know you can. Or Airbus. And what they're saying, though, is we want to get everybody, these major providers of products and systems, whoever they are, whether they sell to Siemens, whether they're integrated with it, we want everybody to realize that this problem isn't going to be solved until we have everybody addressing the problem. So we're going to get all these companies to come together and work together to kind of say we're all dedicated to security. We're all going to address it in a certain way. And so I have it here. Everyone has to address the problem, is the goal. They've agreed to a common set of criteria as to what is security. And apparently, I mean, that was a big challenge for them. You know, you would think it'd be obvious what to do because there's lots of standards. But it all depends on your situation and where you stand and stuff like that, what you do. And then they have a mutually set of endorsed security goals and standards. And these are very basic, but they've gotten everybody to say, we as a company are dedicated to this. They're making sure they're not shipping. Security is not an add-on thing. Security is something built in. They say they're going to stand by it. So I kind of think that's what's needed to solve this whole big problem that I'm framing. And I know it's a big problem. So with that said, now that I've framed the issue, like what I was going to say is, my job as an analyst is just to tell you what the problem is, not to tell you the solution. That's for the panelists to come up and tell you the solutions.